any stressful event, which is prolonged, overwhelming, or unpredictable, that event gets buried at the brain stem. That event gets buried at your state level of memory. It gets buried at your amygdala level of memory. It is as automatic as your heart rate. It is as automatic as your breathing. It is as automatic as your pulse. Now that's powerful. I want you to get that. I want you to grasp that. I want you to embrace that. Because if trauma is at that level and it's that automatic, that clearly and fully explains why your child acts like a little nut. Because he's acting like a little nut because all of a sudden he's on automatic. Dorothy Lewis called that an amygdala hijacking. She says this child has been hijacked by his brain. Bruce Perry also says that. I think Robin Carr Morse, Ghost from the Nursery, I think she also mentioned that. So she may have quoted one of them. But it's an amygdala hijacking. Their amygdalas have taken over their brain. Bruce Perry says states become traits, and the lower level state controls all of the higher level functioning. Okay? So just like your heart rate. Your heart rate, if you're out of breath and your heart's beating really fast and someone asks you a question, what do? You give them an answer immediately? No. You say, give me a minute. Hang on a moment. And you calm yourself down, and then you can think clearly. Think about that with traumatized children. It's huge. It's automatic. It's automated. So what we have to do is we have to engage them at this oxytocin level so we can build up their anti-stress response system, because that's their immunity. I mean, that's going to naturally help them, excuse me, that's going to naturally help them combat against stress. If they don't get that, and I've been saying this for 10 years, if you didn't get it, you don't have it, and you got to get it. Right here. If you didn't get it, you don't have it, and you got to get it. Bottom line. You got to get it. Now, let's say you've been parenting your child from birth. Let's say you've been parenting your child. You adopted them at 1, or right out of the birth canal. Whenever. It doesn't matter. And all of a sudden, you still have this really stressed out 10-year-old. The first thing I got to ask you is, how's your stress? How's your oxytocin? Are you more oxytocin rich in your relationship with your child, or are you more stress rich? Are you oxytocin diminished? All right? Or are you able to calm your own stress? See, we have to think about that. Because that's not about blame. This is about feedback loops. This is about natural energetic exchanges. When I say energetic, I'm talking about vibration, the vibration that is emitted from your amygdala. It's a vibration. It's natural. It's automatic. That's why families are connected. All right? So you have to look at yourself. I have to look at myself anytime I'm engaging with my own children. Anytime I'm engaging with my really stress-sensitive kids at the group home. Anytime I'm engaging with my wife, my staff, my friends, I have to look at myself first in any potentially stressful situation, because I am a part of that feedback loop. Oxytocin becomes so very important. So, like I said, the best available layperson reference on oxytocin is The Chemistry of Connection. There's no special offer, so I'll just mark through that. But you can get the book at postinstitute.com. It's known as The Anti-Stress Hormone. Kirsten Moberg, The Oxytocin Factor, is another very good book. There just aren't that many books out there on oxytocin. This is new science. People who are part of the Post Institute Network, you guys are getting new stuff. You're getting stuff that they're starting to talk about in research circles everywhere. Time Magazine is writing about this stuff. But the lay therapist is not talking about oxytocin. All right, not even the lay therapist. I mean, you got scientists who are still not talking about oxytocin. I'm not even sure if Alan Shore is talking about oxytocin yet. I mean, I just visited with Bruce Perry not long ago, and I asked him if he's looking at oxytocin. He said they've still not even started looking at oxytocin. This is cutting edge stuff. I mean, this is the key. I mean, oxytocin is the answer, and we all have the ability to trigger it in one another. It's use dependent. So if you're oxytocin deprived as an adult, you're going to have a hard time triggering oxytocin in your child. It's essential to the development of effective self-regulation. You've heard me talk about regulation for years, many of you. You got regulation, which is the ability to calm yourself, keep yourself within a window of tolerance. And then you've got dysregulation, which is your experience of stress outside of your window of tolerance. And research says that it is believed that dysregulation is a fundamental mechanism involved in all psychiatric disorders. It comes from Alan Shore, that's Taylor et al. In 1997. That's the affect regulation and the origin of the self. It is believed that affect dysregulation, being stressed out, is a fundamental mechanism involved in all psychiatric disorders. Now, what that also tells me, what it probably should tell you too, is that being oxytocin deficient is also a fundamental mechanism involved in all psychiatric disorders. Because if you are stressed out for a prolonged, overwhelming period of time, you are going to be not all stable. All right, you know, sometimes I say things like nutty or crazy, and, you know, I just use those flippantly, not in any derogatory kind of way, but that's just kind of how I am. You're also going to be oxytocin deficient. So you're not going to have the ability to effectively regulate yourself. And then you see tremendous oxytocin release occurs during orgasm, which presents its own challenges of sexual acting out. Now, Helene can talk about this when she starts talking about it, especially with teen girls. But if you think about this from an adult perspective, what do you need for more oxytocin? Have more orgasms. Okay? I mean, have more orgasms. Make love more often. You know, get as much as you can, because that's your oxytocin response. That's going to help you feel good. It's going to help you calm down. It's going to help you. You know, oxytocin has also been connected to heroin. They say oxytocin and heroin create the same chemical reaction in the brain and the body system. Now, that's powerful. I've never done heroin, but there's a lot of people addicted to heroin. In fact, I was just seeing on the internet the other day that Chicago is like the heroin capital of the United States. That's just amazing, and that also tells me that there are lots of people in Chicago who need more oxytocin. But obviously, we know that that's our whole country. That's our world. So science is just now beginning to discover all the implications for this hormone as it relates to human relationships. So Helene, why don't you take over for a moment and talk to us about the difference between oxytocin and connection as it relates to girls and boys?
I'd love to. I think one of the things I think that excites me the most about the oxytocin in the teens is because so many of us grew up, and you know, when I talk to people and I say, you know, if I paid you $1 million, would you go back to being a teenager? And none of us ever really will, or I find so few people who are. And I think part of the issue is that nobody really understands teens, and teens. The preteen and teen years are the times where, you know, your kids are becoming the most independent, so they're pushing away, they're finding their own individuality, and when, you know, you look at us as just as a society and now as parents trying to raise our kids, when that rejection hits us, it's so easy for us to take those couple of steps back. And so our teens are really receiving the least in oxytocin. And it's also the time as parents that, you know, we tend to back off because we think they should be out there and you know, doing their own thing and being responsible and all that. So how this works for girls is that the onset of menstruation now begins as early as age 9. When that occurs, there's an introduction of progesterone. Progesterone is kind of Mother Nature's way, or Mother Nature's natural volume. And then what that also does is it amps up the estrogen, which in turn, those two chemicals together will then ramp up the oxytocin release. What's interesting about that for girls is, you know, all of what we know about girls going to the bathroom 4 and 5 at a time, or talking about this. We talk about the teen girl gossip. We look at the relational aggression that happens between girls, you know, pushing somebody away, and how devastating that really can be. It really has a lot of implications in the oxytocin. And the the other part of this issue is that progesterone increases your sensitivity to stress. So when we're talking about kids who have been really stressed out and have had all of those significant traumas like you were talking about earlier, when that progesterone is hitting, one of the things that I'm seeing on a consistent basis and that I get a lot of calls about is the second my child hits puberty, what I see is all of a sudden she might go from defiant, resistant to completely aggressive. And then, there's other implications in that teen girls are driven towards relationship, and it's Mother Nature's way of, and Luann Brizendine talks a lot about this, and a lot of her stuff is phenomenal, as well as, Susan Kachinka's. But so Mother Nature's way of trying to, get us to procreate and settle down and all of that for women is now happening for girls at the age of 9. So the dilemma with that is that we're having girls that are physically mature but emotionally can't even handle where they are. And we're not even talking about teens who are in that traumatized state. So now we're looking at teens that overwhelmingly will say 44% of the time they're having sex when they don't want to. So they're building connections when they shouldn't be. And then when you say that that becomes an issue in sexual acting out, is that that teen girl is then building a connection and a bond with that boy. And Susan talks a lot about that. So one of the major implications just on the side of girls is really looking at, dads, where are you? Are you really getting connected? When they say that teen girls or daughters and their fathers create the relationship between them, creates a foundation for all of her future relationships, that becomes really important. Gwen Light talks about the 20-second hug. 20-second hugs creates a lot of biological comfort. So for girls who are always driven towards that relationship, they're always driven towards that connection, one of the worst things that I think that we can do and that we've misunderstood for so long and just in our society is to really be able to pull them in more and connect with them more as they're teenagers, specifically because of the oxytocin. Now, one of the dilemmas that usually comes up is that, my daughter has had a long history of trauma, and in that trauma, it's really hard for me to get connected. My opinion is it all goes back to that relationship. It's creating that little by little. One of the things that I think that we don't really, in essence, realize, and when you're talking about all this oxytocin, Bryan, and you're talking about how we get so stressed out as parents, and it starts with us, and I can say this for myself, it has been a journey to really get an understanding of what it's like to be present, to really be able to be in that moment where you're not thinking about the past, you're not worrying about the future, you're not worrying about the next thing that you're going to say or how you're going to get them calmed down. You're not focused on when we talk about on that outcome, and you are completely in that process and you are completely present. That is one of, I think, the best times to circulate that oxytocin. But what it takes is for us as adults to go back and create that oxytocin, I don't know, I want to say outpouring in our own brains. And now looking at teen boys, onset of puberty for teen boys is between 10 and 12 years old. There's an introduction of something called DHT. What that is a different kind of testosterone for boys. This is where we start to see boys becoming a whole lot more physically aggressive. When teen boys are interacting with females, the second there's any kind of touch for them, it becomes immediately sexual. And again, these chemicals for boys are Mother Nature's way of saying spread the seed as far and wide as possible. So there's not a connection. As the testosterone increases the brain's receptivity to vasopressin, which is really the sister hormone to the oxytocin, this exists in boys.